Hey, in this video we'll be using some console input and output that is usually shortened to I/O. So we'll be using console I/O. That's printing to the console, which we've done already, and taking data in. In the last video we had talked about data types, and we had a bunch of different data types, but only one real way to put data into them, and that was typing literals, typing values, hard coding them into our source code um, to put that data into our variables. So there are a couple of other ways. You might say read a file or try to access some other resource, maybe even like a web page or something, using code and trying to get data. Or you might put data in your variables by asking the user to do something. So in a lot of games we have game controllers, and those act as input, and you can store data from that input. In simple console programs like the one we're working with, we can ask the user to type something in. So I have my hello world program, and it's just printing hello world and then waiting for input, waiting for you to press enter. But readline does read the entire line no matter what. So whatever you type and then press enter, it actually uses that and gives it to your program. So if you look at this little context blurb here, hover over readline, and it tells you that console.readline has string in front of it. That means that this function returns a string value. So it reads in the whole line of characters that you type, and it gives that to your program. So we can use that to do something. So let's tell the user console.writeLine, hey, give me a number. Okay, hey, give me a number. And then console.readline is going to return a string, so we need a string variable. I'm just going to call it input. And then I'm going to try printing out that input. Console.writeLine input. And then I'm going to add another console.readline just so that we can wait at the end for an enter. So when I run this, we get hello world, hey, give me a number, and then it's waiting for input. So let me type in something. Okay, I typed in a number, press enter, and it prints out what I just typed in. Alright, so what if I type in something that's not a number? That's definitely not a number, and it prints out the same thing. So all I'm doing so far is just reading in a string and printing out a string. But what I want to happen is for the user to give me an integer, something that I can use in calculations. Strings are just a bunch of characters, symbols, and they don't really have any meaning other than that. They're meant to be like things that a human could read. But an integer is an actual number that you can multiply or subtract or add or do all sorts of things with. And we can't do that to a string, so we have to somehow convert this string into an integer. So I'm going to create an integer. I'm going to call it number again. And I want to convert our input string into this number. Into an integer so I can store it in this number variable. So I'm going to use number gets, so set it equal to, and C# is very object oriented and actually packs a lot of features into its data types themselves. So int dot will show us what we have to work with, what the integer type can do. And there's a function in here called parse. So int.parse, and I will pass in my input string. This is going to try to convert the input string into an integer and store it into our number variable. And then I want to print out that number. Alright, let's run this. Hello world, hey, give me a number. Okay. Is that a number? So it printed out the same thing that we had before, a number. Great. Okay, now let me try something that's not a number. Enter. Alright, so we ran into our first runtime error. That's this is an exception, and it means that something exceptional happened, that there was an error that your program couldn't handle. It threw an exception, and that causes your program to quit. Because we're running it through Visual Studio, it caught that exception with the debugger. The debugger is meant to be a tool that helps you figure out what your program is doing wrong so you can fix it. But right now I'm not going to use that. I'm going to go up here to the toolbar and press this stop button, stop debugging, and get back to my code. So this parse function is totally fine as long as it's parsing something that is actually going to turn into an integer. But if it parses something that does not represent an integer, then it throws an exception, and that's bad for us. So another way to go about this, let's delete this because we're not sure if this is going to be an integer. We can do int.tryParse. So tryParse, you can see, you can read this information about it. Tryparse will return a Boolean, a true or false value, and it tells you whether or not it succeeded. If it failed, then it returns false. If it succeeded, then it returns true. And that can help your program make the right decision about how to use that number. If that was not actually a number, then you shouldn't use it. But if it is actually a number, then you can. Our program's not going to actually check that. We're just going to plow on ahead and assume that we got a number. So I'm going to type in input, and it's going to output into our, we want it to output into our number variable. So we can type out number as the second argument here. So tryparse is going to take in our input, and it's going to output into this number variable. And then we're going to write that out. So when I run this, hey, give me a number. Okay, numbers are good. Alright, something that's not a number. Alright, so it gave us 0 instead, which if we had actually checked to see whether it succeeded or failed, then we could have skipped that or done something else or said, hey, that's not a number. So this works for us for now. When we get to conditionals, we'll be able to do more. And the last thing here is customizing this prompt. Right now we have hello world, hey, give me a number. But often you see in console programs something a little nicer than this. Give me a number, please. And so it'll prompt you to enter something. You should always be telling the user what they're supposed to do instead of just leaving them at a blank screen expecting them to type something in. So give me a number, please, and I'll put a colon and a space so that the user knows that they need to type there. And I'm also going to change this function call. Instead of write line, I'm going to do just console.write. And so console.write is going to write out this text, but is not going to move on to the next line. When I run this, it'll be more like a prompt you might expect. Give me a number, please. And then you can type in a number, and then it'll go on with the rest of our program. All right, that's it. I will see you next time.